It's a lot more nervous being up here in public. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Subhash Kateel. I represent the Florida Immigrant Coalition, and after I speak, I would like you all to try to spell my name. Just kidding. So, I was very happy when January 1st came by because I thought that there was going to be this big push in our state to fight for the creation of jobs and to keep jobs in the state and bring back jobs in the state. And it's February now, and the one thing that shocked me is, I'm not like a super big researcher, but when I typed the keywords jobs into the proposed bills, the last time I checked, there was maybe one or two job-related bills pending or filed in our legislature. But there's about a half dozen and growing immigration bills. And it was my assumption, my thought, that we started this year off that we were open for business. And I don't feel that way. I feel like we started off this year saying we're open for immigration. And so I could talk a lot about the different things that other folks have touched on the racial profiling provisions in the racial profiling bills, but I think there's a few points that folks really haven't thought about. And the whole thing about pushing cookie cutter bills that copy really bad ideas from other states that aren't doing so well is that we sort of forget to read the fine print. And so I want to just pull out just two sets of provisions from the proposed Arizona bills and that have been surfacing their way through several other bills, both filed in our House and filed in our Senate. So two of the provisions that have been in a couple of different bills whose names or numbers I won't mention. First of all, prohibit localities, cities, towns, and counties from having laws restricting the passing of immigration information over to the feds. And then there's a second provision that gives a private citizen the right to sue a city, town, or county for doing that specific behavior. So I want to tell you what a very real scenario is. You have victims crimes units. You have victims units. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. You have victims units in almost every police force in South Florida. You have human trafficking units. You have domestic violence units. All of whom have very specific, strict policies, in some cases written policies, that forbid the transferring of immigration information of a victim over, right? You're actually, if these laws were to pass, and like I said, these two provisions I mentioned have made their way into several of the bills that we're looking at and we're talking about. You're actually creating a real, very real scenario where you're giving an abuser or perpetrator or a person that's committed a crime the chance to actually, or the family, the actual chance to sue in court a law enforcement agency for not turning the immigration information of a victim of domestic violence over to the feds, for not turning over the immigration information of a witness to a crime to the feds. You're creating a scenario where you're actually able to dismantle victims' crimes units, human trafficking units, domestic violence units, number one. And number two, where you're actually bankrupting localities that are trying to protect victims or witnesses of crime. This is something that folks don't think about. And I'm not saying that this is done intentionally or not intentionally. It's not my call. It's not really my call. All I'm saying is that when you don't think about bills a lot, this is the type of stuff that can happen and that will happen, and it's a matter of time before it happens. I want to talk a little bit also about the climate that this bill, that these bills and this debate is generating. I don't think that everyone that favors these types of bills is necessarily racist or hates all immigrants or anything like that. And I think it's really important to say that. But one thing is, several of the individuals that have taken the dais for the past couple of hearings have said often, and will say repeatedly, that they are against illegal immigration, not against immigration in general. And just as a matter of fact, that's just not true. So some of the organizations that took the dais, for example, FAIR being one of them, are actually for immigration reduction more generally. And on their own mission statement, on their own websites, they say things like they're in favor of reducing the numbers of all immigrants to about 300,000 a year, which means for every immigrant that's deported, you allow one in, right? But then there's the other folks that have attended some of the meetings. For example, the public hearing that Representative Snyder, who I think is a perfectly nice guy, sponsored in Palm City. And when people were talking about their support for bills, other folks that were not affiliated with these organizations, the whole other side, would say things like, well, one person accused the Catholic Church of human smuggling. which is probably why my church was so filled up this past weekend.
Mr. Kateel, just need you to just keep in mind, wrap it up if you can.
No problem. And then, one statement that stuck in my head is one woman said, "I'm tired of waking up in the morning to the sound of roosters crowing." And that was curious to me because I didn't know there was any undocumented roosters or an undocumented rooster problem. But to me, it highlights a problem that this bill is creating a climate. And some of the organizations that are pushing for this bill also support a repeal of the 14th Amendment, which would mean a large number of our representatives of the Hispanic caucus would not be able to even run, and not even be able to represent us in government. So it's more a plea than anything. There's a whole bunch of people here that can get into the details of bills. This debate is about to open up the floodgates of something that's very ugly, and I'm really begging everyone up here to please not open up the floodgates. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Sheeta Hopkins.